नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स। नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स। नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स। बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि, धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि, संघं शरणं गच्छामि, द्वितीयंपि बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि, द्वितीयंपि धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि, द्वितीयंपि संघं शरणं गच्छामि, तृतीयंपि बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि, तृतीयंपि धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि, तृतीयंपि संघं शरणं गच्छामि। पाणातिपाता वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समाधियामि, अदिन्नदाना वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समाधियामि, कामेषु मिच्छाचारा वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समाधियामि मूसावादा वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समाधियामि सुरामेरयमज्जपमादिठाणा वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समाधियामि सब्बपापस्सकरणं कुशलस्य उपसम्पदा सचित्तपर्योदपणम् एतं बुद्धान शासनम् साधु साधु साधु.
Okay, this is the third day. This is the third day in this 7 days series of lecture. As in the previous 2 days, we are going to be reciting Namo Tassa to pay homage to the Buddha before I start talking. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Today the topic is the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truth is the heart of the Buddhist teaching, the center of Buddhist teaching. If we ask ourselves, which is one teaching, only one teaching that we need to know in Buddhism, that would be the Four Noble Truths. When we say four, 1, 2, 3, 4 truths, sometimes we might be tempted to think about it in hierarchical order, in terms of significance, in terms of importance. We like to grade them. But I don't think we need to do that. Because all the four truths, they're linked together. They are totally dependent on each other. It's not possible to realize one truth without realizing the other three. So I like to make this clear at the beginning. Traditionally, what we would say is that the Four Noble Truths, they are a kind of, they're comparable to four ropes, four ropes, keeping them together, and you cut them at the same time. If they are cut off, they will be cut off at once, at the same time. It's not possible that one is cut off and the other three are not. This is the example given. This is to say the function of the Four Truths. They are totally linked to one another. the Four Truths. And the way the Four Truths, the Four Noble Truths are formulated is like this. The first one is the truth of suffering, that suffering really exists. We talk about suffering. The second one, the cause of suffering. If suffering exists, the causes of suffering also exist. So that's reality of the causes of suffering. The third one, if we can identify the causes of a problem, we should be able to address them and then solve them. That is one. The third one is the end of suffering. The last one is the way to end that suffering. Put it in a simple term. If we have a headache, that headache is a reality. Is a reality. So the reality of the problem of headache. The first one is headache. But headache has to have core conditions. Why we get headache? Why we get headache? Is the headache a sign of something that goes wrong in our body, or is it due to stress, persistent stress, or is it due to the temperature, the weather, or is it because we don't have enough rest, we don't have enough sleep, because we're just playing with Facebook, Twitter, internet, or maybe television? Because of that, okay, we deprive ourselves of sleep. So there must be causes of headache. Before we know what are the causes of the headache, the causes of our headache, if we rush to take paracetamol or Panadol straight away, to take painkillers straight away, we would never know what causes our headache. If we don't really know exactly what causes our headache, we won't be able to avoid that next time. So knowing the causes of headache is very important. But once we know the causes, now we are confident that we can address this problem. We can bring this problem to an end. We can overcome this. So that's the third truth. You can see how they are linked together. The end of the problem is linked to knowing the causes of the problem. To recover from a headache, it's important that we know the causes of headache. Even before that, it's important that we recognize the problem of headache in the first place. So 3 truths already: the truth of suffering, the truth of the causes, the truth of the end of suffering. And the last one is, of course, when we become confident that we can overcome this, then we will start applying some solution. So 4 noble truths. These 4 noble truths, they are inevitably linked to one another. Again, as I had mentioned yesterday, the Buddhist teaching of the Four Noble Truths is centered on suffering. If we replace the word suffering with problem, then it's problem-based approach. the approach is based on problem. It requires us to understand, to be interested and understand problem. Otherwise, the Four Noble Truths wouldn't make sense to us. The overall aim of the Four Noble Truths is happiness, to achieve happiness. Then you might ask the question, if this is aimed at achieving happiness, why we focus so much on suffering? So here we need to understand what the Buddha means by suffering. To give you an example, getting upset because of the traffic jam, because of the breakdown of the Wi-Fi, the internet line, the telephone line, the electricity. So if you get upset, the philosophy of the Four Noble Truths would say, you are suffering. Being upset means you are suffering. This is to say, when we are in search of happiness, we need to take anything that prevents us from being happy seriously. So being upset with yourself, the habit of blaming yourself, the habit of blaming other people, all these things, they are suffering, they are considered to be suffering. Not many people would consider being upset as suffering. But the Buddha was very serious about happiness because he believed we as a human being, we don't need to wait until next life. Here and now is possible to be happy. And the way he approached happiness is that to look at what prevents us from being happy. So he uses one word in Pali, in Sanskrit, dukkha, to describe anything that hinders our happiness. So being upset is suffering, is dukkha. Another thing, like another example, getting annoyed. Sometimes we get annoyed, looking at our Facebook, some people, they just put anything up. Sometimes we think it's nonsense and we get annoyed. And that annoyance is also suffering. If your annoyance gets stronger, if it becomes anger, that anger is also suffering. Here, some people may think we use so much, the word suffering to tell you, jokingly. Serious Buddhists are very fond of the word suffering. But the reason we're interested in suffering is because we believe we can do something about it. We believe we can do something about it. If you remember, or if you, some of you may have heard Alexandra Neal, a French-speaking early Western Buddhist who studied in Sikhism in India, the Tibetan Buddhism. Her understanding of the Dhamma, the words of the Buddha, or her understanding of suffering was so good, so precise. I like to quote her, I like to refer to her analysis of the people's reaction in the face of suffering. She said there are 4 kinds of reaction. The first one is that you just deny that suffering is there. You live in total denial of suffering. You don't want to hear about that. You don't want to think about that. You don't want to read anything about that. And if anyone talks about suffering, you just switch off. The world is wonderful. There's no suffering, according to this person, the first category of person in Alexander News analysis. So the first one is in the face of all evidence about suffering, we deny. We can deny COVID-19, the COVID-19. We can deny that anything exists at all. Such thing exists at all. Some young people, at the beginning of this COVID-19 behave almost invincible, as if they were invincible. But as you know that in the last 20 years, to use one description on the, from the BBC website, we have dodged 6 bullets. There have been 6 pandemics, okay, including Ebola, SARS, and MERS, that sort of thing, swine flu, So in the face of all these things, even we see our own suffering, psychological suffering. Sometimes we get upset. Sometimes we get tense. We also see people around us like that. But in the face of that, some people, they live in denial. In order to help them to deny that, they do everything. So that's the first person who lives in denial. The second person is in the face of suffering, they just feel resigned. They feel resigned as if they have no ability to do anything about that. Totally pessimistic, being resigned to almost, fate, kind of fatalistic thinking. They become depressed. They personalize it. Oh no, my life is like this. I will never be able to change this. My life is damn whatsoever. Okay. They feel so much resigned to suffering. So that's passive resignation. That acceptance, you can say, is a form of acceptance, but this form of acceptance lacks wisdom and compassion, because wisdom and compassion gives you a lot of energy. You become active straight away if you have compassion and wisdom. So this second person, this passive, who is passively resigned to suffering, we can say this person is out and out pessimism, holds this out and out pessimism. The third person like to cover, to hide, okay, to cover up suffering. You rationalize it. Okay, if this is suffering, then we have to do something. But the way you do that is without experiencing suffering mindfully, without investigating suffering or problems closely. If you get upset, okay, you reach a can of beer. So you can numb yourself and cover that up. Or you can reach a remote control and switch on your television. Or you can straight away go to your Facebook, your Twitter, and then get yourself distracted. So this is the third person, okay. He accepts suffering to a certain extent, but trying to rationalize it, And the method he uses is destruction. We all do this. We all do this. If you get upset, then should you not be? But before you do that, give yourself 1 minute or 2 minutes. Just stay with that feeling of being upset. Just stay with that. And trying to see how your mind is habitually responding to this being upset. Blaming someone or blaming yourself mainly. Okay, these for your being upset. So if we experience this pain, this suffering mindfully, we will get to know suffering intimately. This intimate knowledge of suffering is very important, because even a simple machine, okay, to operate that, to manage that, we need to know about that. We need to know its drawback, its limits. We need to know its ability, its benefit. We need to know that. Only then we will be able to make use of this machine, this small machine. Well, this is a very simple simile. But suffering is a lot more complicated than this. So we need to observe, investigate what's going on in our heart, in our mind, before we go out and do some gardening. What I'm saying is that, okay, we need to walk the middle path. If we accept something is going through our head, is bothering us, and we're trying to stay with it a little bit, and then we go out and do some gardening, that's okay. That should be okay. Because that doesn't amount to running away. It doesn't amount to suppressing of suffering. The fourth person, according to Alexandra New, okay, is Alexandra David New. Okay, his surname is David New. David dot a dash and New. Okay, David New is the fourth person, is who is courageous enough to take to wage war against suffering. This person has confidence in the possibility of overcoming suffering. Okay, having confidence or faith, if you like, in ourselves, in our ability that this problem can be overcome. Many people talk about the COVID-19, the lockdown, its impact, the restriction being imposed upon our life. And they talk about that out of frustration. They talk about that out of frustration. Frustration means at that moment when they are frustrated, they are not actually looking for a way out. They are not actively thinking about a solution. Instead, they are just moaning, complaining, okay, out of frustration. So here in COVID-19, if we talk about the impact on jobs, on people's psychology, if we talk about its impact on the way of life we used to have, the old normal life. If we talk about that, if we do that in the right way, we will be able to empathize with others. We feel compassion for ourselves. We also feel compassion for other people, because it's the world that is suffering. It's not any particular nation. You know, the United Kingdom, I mean, everyone is affected. Everyone is affected. The impact, the negative impact from this coronavirus is more than the figure of infection and the figure of deaths. It's more than that. It's also more than the financial figure that the chancellor, the finance minister issue. Is more than that. It's a lot more than that. So if we think about its impact deeply on many people, then in our mind, we will start thinking what we can do. Because individually, we can do a lot by taking care of ourselves, by following social distancing, by keeping in touch with our families and friends. We are actually doing great things, okay, in the fight against this COVID-19. So what Alexandra David Neal is saying, the faith in the possibility of overcoming it, is that despite suffering, despite problem, in this case, despite the COVID-19, we retain positive thinking. We believe it's possible to overcome this. Humanity, okay, has succeeded many times against this kind of pandemic. As you know, more than 120 scientist groups who have been working on vaccines. So the Buddhist approach towards suffering is not about giving it up. The very point that we recognize suffering is because we believe. Of course, we follow the Buddha. The Buddha believed it's possible to overcome it, and we also believe that we can overcome it. Okay, those who are in England, if you can't hear me clearly because it's raining, okay? Because it's raining here, it's raining heavily, okay? I'd like to continue a little bit about suffering. In the first sermon, the Buddha talks about suffering at 3 levels. 3. The first one is physical level. That physical level is something like getting sick, getting old, the trauma of birth, the phobia of death, the fear of death. So these are associated with physical suffering. We can add into this hunger, for example, lack of basic material needs. Okay, we can say these are also physical suffering at the physical level. Suffering at the physical level. Then the second one is at the psychological level. This is more comprehensive. This one, the Buddha describes it as to be with something unpleasant. Maybe to be in a place we don't want, to be with the people we don't like, to have something that we don't really like. I'm not sure if you can hear me because no, I'm not using microphone. Okay, I'm straining my voice. You can hear me. Okay, thank you. I have got 2 new microphones today, but I have not tested them, so I'm not using them, so I have to speak out. So the second level of suffering, psychological suffering, is not to get what we want, not to meet the people we want to meet, not to have a government that we like, all those things. Not only that, of course, vice versa, it also means to get what we don't want, to meet the people that we don't like, to meet the people that we don't like, to be eating food that we don't like, to be in a place that we don't like. This is the psychological level, which is more comprehensive than the first one. In brief, it means not to get what we want. So here the Buddha analyzes disappointment. Disappointment is about not getting what we want and getting what we don't want. The third one, the final and the third one, is even more comprehensive than this. The third suffering is about grasping the mind and the body, about the physical experiences and psychological experiences, about that grasping. Because in life, we do have things that are considered to be pleasant, that we consider to be pleasant. It's a pleasure. But when we get attached to them, maybe food, maybe clothes, maybe music, maybe anything, then if something happened to what we like, we suffer. If what we like disappears or it changes, then we also suffer. This third category of suffering is the most wide-ranging suffering. Is the most wide-ranging suffering. But let's move to the second noble truth. The second noble truth is usually the with that, but I would like to describe the behavior or the manifestation of attachment. Attachment is something that repeats itself again and again. If you get upset with someone, if you get upset again and again with this person, there is actually attachment. Attachment is not only to pleasant things, but also to unpleasant things. If we think about something, and whenever we think about it, we get angry, this repetitious behavior of the mind is called attachment. If that happens, what do? We're trying to get something to replace it, trying to get something that would please us to replace it. So we are always looking for something to replace unpleasant experience that we have. And that's never ending. That's never ending. For example, now I'm in Burma, I'm in Myanmar. I miss Oxford, I miss England. Is the rainy season here? In the UK, the weather should be good. The start of the summer. When I'm here and when there's so much rain and it's difficult to move around, and I start thinking about the nice weather in England. But when I'm in England, when it's too cold, then I think of Rangoon. You see, the mind is always looking for something which is not within our reach at the present moment, simply because subconsciously we are rejecting the present moment. That is why sometimes we say being able to live at the present moment means to reduce attachment and also to reduce suffering. When we say attachment, we have two kinds of attachment. One is attachment to the senses, to what we can see, what we can hear, what we can touch, what we can taste, what we can smell. And senses that is possible to do something about this is the third noble truth, the end of suffering. Of course, when you have totally got rid of this pain, or the causes of this pain, the causes of suffering, and that's called nirvana, of course, here and now. Okay, we don't need to wait until next life. When we can see in the attachment, we can see all the three poisons we discussed yesterday. If we see them, the moment we see them, those three poisons, they get weakened. The more we see them, each time we see them, they get weaker and weaker. They are being replaced by generosity, by compassion, by wisdom, by wisdom. And when the replacement is total and complete, that would be nirvana, here and now. Of course, to do that, what do we have to do? We need to follow the Eightfold Path, which I'm going to be talking on Monday. Is enough to say for today that it includes mindfulness, to be aware, okay, what's going on in our mind, to be aware of suffering, to be aware of pain, to be aware of expectation or disappointment. This is part of the solution. And if we can look a little bit further in our neighbors, in other countries, that this kind of suffering is also there, then we come to have a perspective on suffering. And we can say this is the beginning of wisdom, the beginning of right understanding. Then further, what we have to do is to strengthen our mindfulness, our awareness, so that we can train our emotion, so that we can replace anger. We can replace anger replace anger with compassion. We can replace delusion with understanding, with wisdom. If that happens, that will have an impact on the way we behave, the way we live. That means ethical way of life. That ethical way of life depends on our understanding and our emotional training, especially compassion. So to conclude today, I would like to say that we use mindfulness, which is the fourth noble truth, to observe the first one, which is suffering. You can see the first noble truth doesn't come first and the fourth one comes last. No, not like that. The Buddha said, with the truth of suffering, we need to understand. With the truth of the causes, we need to be able to remove them. With the truth of the cessation of suffering, we need to achieve it. With the truth of the solution, we need to be able to put into practice. So they have different functions. Those different functions, they come together. Maybe at the beginning, they come together 1%, 2% like this. If we are mindful for 5 minutes, we can see suffering better than before. Then we are closer to seeing the causes of our pain, the causes of suffering. Not just our pain, but also suffering around the world. And when we see the causes, and we have more confidence that we should be able to do something about this. So the 4 functions corresponding to the Four Noble Truths, they function at the same time. Understanding anger as suffering, understand anger as suffering means that understanding is the eightfold path, the solution. We use the 4th one. We use we use mindfulness to understand suffering. When we observe suffering, because when we're observing our own anger, for example, we're actually diagnosing what's wrong, with our psychological habit. So if we're able to diagnose that, then we are closer to taking a proper treatment and removing the causes of our illness. So the Four Noble Truths is actually based on diagnosing human life, human condition. With a proper diagnosis, we are closer to a proper treatment and cure. Okay, thank you. Any question?
Thank you, Bhante. So we have some questions here. One question is, how do we as students find motivation and hope and build resilience if we have somehow lost our path along the way? How do we see the truth about the present when emotions draw us back to the past?
I have to answer this question the way I answered yesterday. Come back to breathing. Come back to breathing. At least for half a second, for half a minute, for 30 seconds. Give yourself this one. Just breathe in and out. Give your lung, okay, sufficient oxygen. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. This is important. If you think you are tired, physically tired, then lying down in your bed, or maybe in the park, maybe in the garden, just breathe in and out nicely. Before you make any decision, before you apply any solution, okay, just breathe in and out. And then next, what you should be doing is to see if you have any tension. As a student, if you have that kind of emotion, usually you might be suffering from a burnout as a student. So if that happens, look at the muscles around your head. If the muscles are tense, the muscles around your cheeks, if they are tense, okay, you should be kind to yourself. At least give yourself kindness, okay? At least give yourself kindness for 1 full minute. 1 minute. Give yourself, oh, my body is tired. Give yourself that kindness. And then breathe in and out. In. Don't decide anything during that 1 minute, during that 2 minutes. Don't decide anything. You deserve to treat yourself kindly, okay, at least for 2 or 3 minutes. And then another one, this is especially for students. I want you to check if you have any, if you have had maybe in the last 1 month, 2 months, if you have had any physical exercise, if you don't, I want you to go for a walk for about 10 minutes. Nice walking, it's quick, so that you sweat. Only then, okay, you come to think about your problem. You come to think about your problem. But before you actually think about your problem, I want you to do one thing. That is to think about how hard you have worked and how much you have achieved so far. Because in that depressing situation, people cannot really connect with what is positive in their life. Their mind is totally obsessed and overwhelmed by negativity. Negativity bias, we say this. It happened to students, okay, like this. I have gone through this. At Oxford University, I didn't have a scholarship. I didn't have funding. And I need to worry about that as well. At the same time, my study. There are students who have got good funding and are still depressed because of the workload they face, because of the pressure. The way I deal with that is to look back the past, okay, the hard work I have put in and what I have been able to do to connect with my own strength. Then neurologically, we are changing, okay? We are changing our brain, the two hemispheres of our brain, right and left. The emotional part is the right side. So when we are emotional about our study, when we are worried, when we become depressed, the right side of the brain is working. And perhaps also the old brain, the back brain is also working, because fear comes in from time to time, and we are just repeating the same worry. In that situation, the calm and executive brain, the left side, is not active, is not working. In Buddhist terms, okay, when worry is dominant, wisdom is not active. So you need to take care of that stress first before you make a decision, before you think about inspiring yourself once again. So confronting that stress, perhaps a burnout, that's very important to recognize that. Okay, this is part of the student's life. It may be a burnout. Maybe I need to be kind to myself. Do I have enough sleep? Do I have enough exercise? So it's about going back to basics. And then when your mind is a little bit calmed down, you will be able to see the opportunity that your study might be able to present you. And that's when hope will arise again. So I'm just describing in a very detailed way, for students. I'm sure like this you will be able to do something. And of course, when you have more confidence, then you talk to people. And I can tell you most of the time, students' program are all program that some people have already gone through. Meaning, the answer is somewhere. We just need to find it out. Okay, another question.
Thank you, Bhante. I have a question here. which asks, can you please give some guidance on how to develop compassion when thinking of other people? Is there a way to start if you find everyone horrible?
We need to start with some people we agree with. We think about their pain, their suffering. We should not start with the people we disagree with, because that will trigger anger and resentment, negative emotion. If possible, you can start with you. If you can't, some people, find it difficult to feel compassionate about themselves. They think it's a weakness to feel compassionate towards themselves. They're mistaken in that. But anyway, if they can't do it, they can't do it with themselves. They can't start with themselves. They need to start with someone else. We can start, okay, you can start with your pet. You can start with your best friends. You can start with innocent children suffering. The point is, we need to focus on an object or a person, a person as an object. That person, we need to feel that that person is totally helpless. If we think about somebody who is very stressed out, we need to think about that this person is really helpless, because he doesn't know about his stress, he doesn't recognize his stress, and he's trying to beat around the bush and not getting the point. In that respect, that person is helpless at that time. So if we have this helplessness as a feeling in our heart when we look at someone, then there is a great opportunity for compassion to arise. If you think about people who are suffering from COVID-19, who can't really do anything to help themselves. Some people need oxygen supply, some people need ventilator, or some people, okay, they just have to be at home because the hospitals don't admit them. The hospital wouldn't admit them. And they have to be at home and wait until the antibody, the resistance kicks in and start fighting. It may go either way. So if we have those people in mind and we feel their pain, we feel that they are helpless, then compassion will arise. We can start with that. From there, we can expand to things. When we say about helplessness, we are talking about our limits. There are things that we feel helpless in life. You don't want to get old, I don't want to get old, but we are helpless. We can only do a little bit to retain, okay, our energy, our stamina, and our youth. Only, a tiny bit that we can do. It's a one-way system. So if we think about this as a universal program, common to everyone, common to our neighbors, our friends, and the people we like and we don't like, then there's an opportunity for compassion to arise. If you just think about hunger, okay, every day we feel hungry a few times, 2 or 3 times, 4 times, for example. We feel thirsty even more. When we feel that, if you stay with that hunger for 1 minute, how helpless is this body? We cannot choose not to be hungry. No, we are helpless. We just need to follow the dictation of this nature, to get hungry and then to prepare food to eat, to process that. We are helpless. We can't do anything else except this. So if we use this fact as an exercise for compassion, then when you get hungry, when you are hungry, trying to feel that physiological impact of hunger, then psychological impact. How we become easily irritated, how we lose our concentration. Then think about your neighbor. They also go through this every day. When you're preparing for your lunch, they are also preparing their lunch. Everybody is doing that because we are all helpless, okay? We cannot resist this hunger. So with this, it's possible to do compassion. And at a certain point during the day, we run out of our energy. We need to switch off and rest. And this physical body reaches its limit at a certain point during the day. So even this one can be a source for compassion. So actually, it's not that difficult to practice compassion. Another question.
Thank you, Bhante. I have a question here which reads, does compassion and empathy need boundaries for self and other? Can it lead to burnout? Thank you.
Physically and verbally, yes, there are limits, but psychologically, there should be no limit. There should be no limit. The fact that I can't do everything to help the people with COVID-19, it doesn't mean that I should switch off and not think about that problem, nothing about that pain, no. If we switch off, we are not prepared to do something even when we can. So we need to distinguish between psychological compassion, empathy, and compassion. Actually, they start in the mind, they start with mind, with psychology. But of course, with physical action, with verbal action, the limits are clear. When we want to say something to help someone, we are not even sure if that person is receptive at all, or what we are going to say is appropriate and beneficial at all. We are not even sure about that. So there is physical limitation and verbal limitation, but feeling the mind of those, feeling the pain of those people, we shouldn't stop. But we shouldn't be focusing on only one person. When we talk about compassion, we talk about different groups. We group people based on the nature of our emotion. Ourselves, the people we like, neutral people, the people we don't like, and then the whole world. The reason we do this is because we have put up a lot of barriers between those groups. So actually, it's about bringing down those barriers that we ourselves have set up in our subconscious mind. That is why we must go round and round, okay, from one group to another, then to the next, just to purify our emotion. Because sometimes we can connect with the pain of a certain group, but not the other. Especially people who don't agree with this, or people, who speak in a very annoying way, we wouldn't be able to connect with their pain. Okay, so we need to break down this one. We need to work on this hindrance. If we work on this hindrance, according to scientists who study mindfulness and brain, your mind will become even more creative. So it's important to do away with the hindrances to compassion. More question.
I have a question here, which is, how can we reduce attachment to negative things, and particularly negative things which keep recurring in thoughts?
to see it as a problem, to see it as a suffering. Problem is not enough, to see it as a suffering. Not just in you, but also in other people. Because you can see some people in the newspaper, on television, on Facebook, some people who are very obsessed with negativity. Meaning negative thoughts is going through their mind all the time. Negative thought is easily triggered. So you look at them as suffering, and you look at yourself as suffering. If you can, as I mentioned earlier, okay, you can come back to your breathing. Just breathe in and out maybe 4 or 5 times, and then link with that negative thought. How negative thought is pulling you to one direction, dictating you to do anything negative, asking you to reject anything positive. Okay. If you try to look at it as a third person, and look at that as suffering, then you wouldn't justify your negative thought anymore. Usually those negative thoughts, they persist because we justify them. I'm having this negative thought because this person is stupid, this person is like this, like that, I mean, we feel so delighted subconsciously, justifying a negative thought. Okay. I think we can have one more question, 2 more questions. Maybe.
Thank you. Question is, when we talk about mindfulness, where is the mind located? Is it in the brain or the heart?
I want you to read, to listen, or if you have the book, to read, to listen on YouTube. The book by Dr. James Doty that I mentioned yesterday, Into the Magic Shop. I want you to listen to that because this is the latest research about the mind and the brain question. Of course, since the early 1950s, people have this question about mind and brain. But I think we have moved so far. We have moved ahead from this question. Most of the time, okay, the interest in this question is not formulated in this animal, in this form anymore. Of course, as far as Buddhist psychology and philosophy are concerned, okay, it's not the location of the mind that we're interested. Like Professor James Doty said, okay, this brain is not the mind. But if this brain is not working, it affects the mind. By looking at the 4 sections, some people say 5 sections, some people say 6 or 7 sections of the brain, you cannot really find the mind. Not so far. The billions of neurons, some people count 2 billion, some people count until 98 billions. So in those billions and in the circuitry, in the way they work, no, people cannot really find. But what is interesting in Professor James Doty's book is that he said to an emotion, okay, the heart and the brain would respond at the same time. He's a neurosurgeon, as I told you yesterday. He is the person who edited the Oxford Handbook of Compassion. Then what in Buddhist psychology and philosophy, what we are looking for is, we understand the mind to be working in a process. The mind is not a thing that we can hold and show like this, where it is located. When I see you on the screen, my eyes and the visual object, which is you, they come into contact. And of course, because I pay attention, that attention is another one. And because there is light also, because of then there is consciousness that, okay, there is someone. We call that consciousness. We call that mind. And that mind arises only when you appear and when I look at it and when there's light, when there is attention. Not before that. Before that, there's another consciousness, there's another mind arising. So consciousness of mind, or shall we say consciousnesses of minds, okay. One consciousness arises and then it goes away, it disappears to leave room for the next one to arise. So if we consider the mind to be working in that process, something like, it's not exactly the same, but is we can think in that term. It's something like our cell, our molecule, DNA, everything physical that replicate itself all the time. So the mind works in that process. So where the mind then? The mind is everywhere in the body. The mind is everywhere. Because, okay, if I touch myself, I touch my hand like this, that my mind is going to be there. When I feel that, when I feel the pain, my mind is going. So you can see the mind is working very, very quick, and one after another. It's working so successively, consecutively, continuously that we don't see any break. And we think is one piece, is a thing, is static. No, it's not a static thing. It's not a substance. That's the whole point. The whole point of the Buddha teaching. He verified that, okay, through his own experience. And he said, okay, don't believe him, but he invites you to verify it through your own experience, personal experience. That is to develop some concentration so that we can see things are changing in real time on the spot. If that happens, we will see that the mind or the consciousness that we had at the beginning of the talk is no more there. It has given rise to many other successive consciousnesses, which also in turn, okay, come and go, rise and cease. So that's the way we understand mind.